Your feet are bleeding. You don't know it yet, but they've been bleeding for 2 days. There's no mirror, no first aid kit, no moment to stop and assess. You just keep moving, because stopping means not eating, and not eating means not surviving. Welcome to your Ancestors Tuesday. For roughly 300,000 years, every single human being on this planet lived this way. No grocery stores, no hospitals, no shelter that someone else built for you. Just your body, your group, and a world that was actively trying to kill you. You probably imagine yourself adapting. You probably think the instincts would kick in. They wouldn't. Not fast enough. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why. Let's start before the sun comes up. You wake on hard ground. Not a mattress, not even a sleeping bag, compacted earth, or a thin layer of leaves you arranged the night before. Your back aches in a way that no amount of stretching fixes, because the ache isn't from one bad night. It's cumulative. Weeks of this. Months. Your body has never known what it feels like to fully recover. Anthropologist James Sussman, who spent decades living alongside the Jew/Hoansi Sand people of the Kalahari, one of the last surviving hunter-gatherer communities on Earth, noted that despite common assumptions, their sleep was fragmented, often interrupted by cold, animals, and the demands of communal life. They didn't sleep worse than us. They slept differently. But you, coming from a life of temperature-controlled rooms and padded surfaces, would experience that first morning as a kind of quiet devastation. You were already hungry. Your last full meal was yesterday midday. Your body, trained on 3 predictable meals a day plus snacks, is now running a cortisol spike that feels like anxiety. It is anxiety, the biological kind, the kind your nervous system was never supposed to experience without an immediate solution. You need to find food. Now, everything else waits. Here is where most people's mental image of prehistory starts to collapse. You probably picture hunting. A spear. A large animal. A triumphant kill. That's not how most of your calories arrived. Richard Lee's landmark 1963 study of the Kung San people of the Kalahari, one of the most cited pieces of anthropological fieldwork ever conducted, found that roughly 60 to 80% of their diet came not from hunting, but from gathered plant foods. Roots, tubers, berries, nuts, seeds. Hunting was unreliable. Hunting failed more often than it succeeded. Women doing the gathering were, in caloric terms, feeding the group. The men with spears were the gamblers. The women with digging sticks were the backbone. You don't have a digging stick. You don't know which roots are edible and which will shut down your liver in 6 hours. You don't know which berries in this biome are food and which are a slow death sentence. That knowledge, the kind that kept your ancestors alive, took years to acquire. It was handed down in detail, tested, refined over generations, encoded into language and story and song. You didn't grow up with it. You cannot download it. And without it, the landscape around you is not a pantry. It's a minefield. So let's say you find something. Berries. They look familiar, not because you know them, but because they look like something from a grocery store. That similarity is exactly what will get you killed. Dozens of toxic species mimic edible ones closely enough that the difference only reveals itself after you've eaten them. The Kalahari alone contains more than 100 species of edible plant, but their distribution, seasonality, and preparation methods are a body of knowledge that takes a lifetime to master. Polly Wiessner, an anthropologist who has studied sand communities for over 40 years, documented how plant knowledge was transmitted socially, through specific relationships, specific mentors, specific seasons. You missed all of it. Now it's mid-morning. You're walking. You've been walking since before sunrise. Not leisurely. Not a nature hike. Walking with purpose and attention, scanning constantly, maintaining awareness of every sound and movement around you. This is cognitively exhausting in a way that desk work is not. Your brain, evolved for this environment, is working, but your body is not conditioned for the terrain. Your feet, accustomed to cushioned shoes and flat surfaces, are meeting rocks, thorns, uneven root systems, and compacted clay. Blisters form fast. In a world without antibiotics, an infected blister is not a minor inconvenience. It's a serious threat. Skeletal records from sites like Nadaruk in Kenya, a 10,000-year-old massacre site excavated by Marta Mirazan Lar and her team at Cambridge, show evidence of healed fractures, bone infections, and injuries that modern medicine would treat in an afternoon. For your ancestors, These were months-long recoveries, if they recovered at all. You haven't thought about water yet. That's a problem. Your body needs roughly 2 to 3 liters of water per day under normal conditions. Out here, sweating and walking in heat, you need more. Finding safe water is not as simple as finding water. Standing pools breed bacteria. Stagnant water carries parasites, Giardia, Cryptosporidium, that produce symptoms within days. Severe cramping, diarrhea, dehydration. The diarrhea causes more dehydration. The dehydration impairs judgment. Impaired judgment in this environment is fatal. Hunter-gatherer communities carried intimate knowledge of water sources, seasonal springs, underground seeps, the moisture content of specific plants, the tracks that led toward rivers. Again, knowledge you don't have. By noon, you've eaten almost nothing and drunk almost nothing, and you are making bad decisions. Hunger and mild dehydration impair prefrontal function, the part of your brain that makes careful, patient choices. You're more impulsive now, more likely to approach something unfamiliar without caution, more likely to overestimate your own strength. Your ancestors would have been managing this constantly, learning to read their own physical state and respond to it strategically. You don't have that calibration. You feel fine right up until you don't. Now comes the social problem. Hunter-gatherer survival was not a solo endeavor. It never was. The idea of the lone, rugged individual surviving by wits and strength alone is a modern fantasy. The archaeological and anthropological record is clear. Humans survived because they cooperated. Elaborately, specifically, and generationally. Your group would have included people with specialized knowledge, who knew the medicinal plants, who could read animal signs, who remembered where the water was last dry season, who knew how to resolve a conflict before it fractured the band. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner's research on the role of firelight storytelling among the Jew/Hoansi found that evening conversations around the fire weren't casual socializing. They were an active transmission system for social information, conflict resolution strategies, and long-range ecological knowledge. The fire was the internet. You were not plugged in. You don't know anyone in this band. And trust, deep, tested, reciprocal trust, is the only currency that matters out here. Who will share food with you when you fail to find any? Who will help carry you if you're injured? Who will watch while you sleep? In tightly bonded hunter-gatherer groups, these relationships were built over years. You have nothing to offer and no history to draw on. It's late afternoon now. You've covered perhaps 15 kilometers. Your feet are in serious trouble. You found some berries. You ate them, hoping, and your stomach is beginning to signal that this was a mistake. You are cold, because the temperature has dropped more than 20 degrees since morning, and the only warmth available is fire and bodies. You don't have a fire. You don't have a lighter. You know, vaguely, that friction fire starting is possible. What you don't know is that bow drill fire starting typically takes months of practice to achieve reliably, that the wood species matter enormously, that moisture content is the difference between an ember and failure, and that most beginners cannot produce a coal even in ideal conditions. Tonight is going to be very cold. Your ancestors weren't tougher than you in some mystical, innate sense. They were trained, from birth, by a community that had been training for this for thousands of generations. The toddler in a sand band was already learning which plants to avoid by watching adults. The child was learning fire by helping. The adolescent was learning tracking by following experienced hunters across terrain that told stories in footprints and broken grass. By the time an adult sand person stood alone in the Kalahari, they were not alone. They carried a library. You don't. Here is the real twist. Your ancestors' lives were not, in all measurable ways, lives of constant misery. Lee's study found that adult, Kung San men spent on average only about 2.5 days per week in subsistence activities. Marshall Solins, the economic anthropologist, famously called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society, not because they had much, but because their needs and their means were aligned. They were not running a deficit. They were not in chronic scarcity. They had leisure. They had storytelling. They had ceremony. They slept when tired, moved when they chose, and, in ecological terms, lived within their means in a way no modern society has managed. But that equilibrium was the product of everything you don't have: the knowledge, the relationships, the physical conditioning, the ecological literacy, the social web, and the generational transmission of all of it. Strip those away, put a modern person into that landscape with nothing, and the gap becomes fatal within days. Your feet are still bleeding. Your stomach is cramping now. The temperature is dropping. And you are alone in the dark, holding two sticks that refuse to make fire. In a landscape your body was built for, but your mind was never taught to read. Your ancestors didn't just survive this world. They understood it. That's the part no amount of modern toughness can replicate overnight. And that gap, between a body that evolved here and a mind that was never trained here, is exactly where the week ends for you.